It is the Global Business Report here on Arise News. Rhoda Sodiri joining you from the commercial capital of Nigeria, Lagos. And of course, kicking things off is the big story from the United States, which is that the U.S. Court of Appeal has dealt a blow to President Trump's tariffs, deeming most of them, not all, illegal. 7-4 decision. And they basically said that President Trump had exceeded his authority with respect to IEEPA, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. And of course, now the case is going to head over to Supreme Court. The U.S. markets are closed today for Labor Day, but we're very happy to have Sam Jurrens, who of course is the CEO of Even Heard, joining us from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you and happy Labor Day. I wanted to get your reaction to the appeals court decision on tariffs from Friday. Is this going to cause uncertainty in the markets? I know the U.S. markets are closed, but what's your take on that decision and what could happen going forward?
Yeah, uncertainty is kind of the baseline, I feel like, right now for the markets. But in general, this case is going to set a very important decision moving forward for the future of the country, outlining specifically what power the executive branch has in setting foreign trade, which is a case that I think needs to happen. The current environment is somewhat unprecedented for the last several decades. But having a president that's now coming in, when he first started in office, he used the guise of national security, using the fentanyl trade as a reason for many of these tariffs. But, as we saw on Liberation Day in April, it kind of went to sweeping tariffs. So I think it's an important case. What happens, we'll have to watch closely. In terms of, market volatility, I'm not overly concerned. It looks like everything kind of stays in place until mid-October anyways. The mega caps have all been exempted already. So it's definitely a headache for those other businesses that have to deal with this. And now they have more uncertainty of what's going to happen. And, if they're trying to play magic cards on their trade already, this just kind of throws out the timeline for them even further.
Now, I also want to, there's also so much going on in the United States. There's also the Federal Reserve. President Trump's attempt, firing of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. And I guess what that means for the independence of the Federal Reserve, and I guess that what translates to how the U.S. economy is perceived by investors. How are you following what's been going on there?
Yeah, the optics aren't great. Especially the soap opera now we have with Bill Pulte. If it would have been coming from someone else, he previously was made an official announcement, we could call it, of his belief that there were rumors that Fed Chair Powell was stepping down. Which, didn't pan out as well. So for him to kind of be the front runner in this as well, adds a little bit extra spice to the drama. Why Trump is getting involved with it, I don't know. It definitely isn't good on optics. I think he would be better off letting this allegation play out and letting the courts play it out rather than, intervening himself. I think him of all people would appreciate letting the court system play out rather than, having some aggressive action come in before. So it is definitely causing drama and probably going to have more uncertainty just in terms of, day-to-day headlines more than anything.
Now, since we're talking about the Fed, Sam, I wanted to get your take on what's to come on September the 17th. Got the next FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee decision. It looks like a cut is a lock at this point. 25 basis points is what is expected. But there's this big debate between inflation, of course, and the labor market. We get jolts, I think, on Wednesday, jobless claims Thursday, and then the big one, non-farm payrolls on Friday. Of course, everyone knows Trump fired the last Bureau of Labor Statistics head because he didn't like the last job numbers. How are you reading this, the debate, I guess, between the Fed's mandates, between full employment and price stability, and what that means going forward for monetary policy? How are you seeing it all?
Yeah, it's been chaotic to say the least. The Fed was pretty adamant they were going to have cut in the first place if they weren't so concerned with tariffs. specifically inflation caused by tariffs. But to me, my personal opinion, inflation is from money printing. And so if they're concerned with some kind of inflation spike, it's going to be temporary and potentially debilitating to the economy. However, we're not really seeing any weakness, specifically in the economy outside of, employment remains mixed. But if I'm honest with you, I think employment's going to be a very confusing data point for the next decade, especially as AI comes in and we see businesses be able to drop headcount while increasing productivity, which is pretty unique to any other point in time in history. And so I think employment's going to be difficult to watch. It is the indicator that's teetering, especially, like you mentioned with the BLS data that was revised, which, the job strength before that got revised away was very odd in the first place. It's summertime here in the U.S. During that announcement, and education was one of the largest employment increases, which didn't really add up in the first place. And so, I think there's a lot of confusion around that data. And barring anything in extreme coming out between now and then in the numbers, I think the Fed will definitely cut and probably continue to cut if employment does weaken. But we're sitting at all-time highs with nearly every commodity, every equity index globally. It's a very unusual period to see, a aggressive Fed in cutting. So I think it will be moderate in terms of, the scale that they do it of 25 basis points, probably each meeting from here for the foreseeable future.
All right, we'll see how things work out there. I also want to get your take back to, I guess, fiscal policy, if you will. The U.S. government's attempt to get a 15% cut of Nvidia and advanced micro devices, AMD chip sales to China. On their earnings, if you want to also chime in on what you thought about Nvidia's earnings, that's fine. But the Chief Financial Officer, Colette Kress, she did say, I think on the earnings call, it was in an interview that, quote, "I don't have to do this 15% until I see something that is a true regulatory document." So what do you make of what's happening there in the tech space?
I don't like it personally. I think it's going to set a horrific precedence that for a government to come in and just say, you owe us 15% of these specific sales. It's kind of a reverse tariff in a way, but it's only unique to two businesses, which, technology now more than ever is changing so quickly. And we kind of left out the point too that the U.S. took 10% of Intel ownership stake on top of that. So now they're charging 15% to this business over here, but taking ownership in this business over there. I don't think it's a good policy for the government to get involved to this extent. And I think the president himself probably has several quotes of the past of government picking winners and losers, and it's not a good deal. And so I think it does set a very bad precedence. I'm glad Nvidia is at least, trying to make it a little bit more formal rather than, just a handshake deal as well. But I think it will be interesting how it plays out and could set a very odd tone moving forward if Nvidia is forced to pay this.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Intel. That also was another big one there, that 10% stake. So still sticking with tech and chips, Alibaba, their Hong Kong shares up about 19% in trading this morning. I guess on the news of more capex and more returns from AI spending on their part. What do you make of their push? Because the Wall Street Journal had a report that they're looking to make an advanced chip to rival the Blackwell chip from Nvidia. How do you see that playing out over in China and Asia?
Yeah, I think it's important to have, as many players in the space as possible. What Alibaba is really focused on, I would say they're more looking at being the Broadcom than the Nvidia. They're kind of focused on the second half of, rather than training the models, they're looking at the inference side. Think of the daily usage of the models, which most people, I think the markets were pretty excited about it because most people's theory is that, the model improvement is going to diminish over time as these models get, more intelligent, where Alibaba's focused on that daily usage side, which I feel like that's where the competitive advantage and, major business opportunity is going to be long term. And so, yeah, the markets were definitely excited about this, and I'd have to agree with them too.
Sam Jurrens, CEO over at Even Heard, thank you so much for getting up early to talk to us. I want to wish you a happy Labor Day and hope to catch up with you again. Thank you so much for your time. That's Sam Jurrens, CEO at Even Heard, joining us from Oklahoma City.